everybody. Welcome back to Downtime Activities, and welcome back to our still unnamed um, sort of discussion video series. Mostly because this is what Erickson and I really like to do: is sit down and just discuss world building and storytelling and tabletop RPGs and video games as well. Just this stuff that we are very passionate about and want to always get better at running. Um, and we've got a lot of topics that aren't necessarily long enough for our bonus action series, um, but we feel like are really worth discussing and talking about anyway. And this is something that is a question that has kind of popped up in my head fairly recently, especially with you moving to California and it complicating our uh, recording setup and our just ability to meet and play tabletop RPGs. Period.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, since we were meeting at your house, um, and just an issue we've run into a lot, kind of since we all became adults and everyone has jobs and. As everybody who plays any tabletop RPG knows, scheduling for these things uh, is next to impossible sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely hard to find time to meet. It's hard to find a time when the whole group can be there. And for bigger, in-depth story-driven games, you don't want to just like be meeting without people or at least trying to avoid it. So the question at that point kind of becomes like, why do we keep coming back? Like, what's keeping us in this sphere? Like, like what has taken a hold of us so much that despite all of these difficulties, it's we still just keep coming back and keep playing tabletop RPGs.
Why is it that, in light of all these things that make it hard to do this, it still feels fully worth it to kind of move past those hurdles to do this thing? Why do we love it so much? Why is it so fun to us? And that's a conversation I think is worth having, and one
Mm-hmm.
that's can be a complicated answer and very dependent individual by individual, like what each
Absolutely.
person gets out of the game. Um,
And it's just worth, I think, reminding ourselves of that sometimes as well. It's it's one of those things of like it's worth stepping back and examining this thing that we're doing and like putting some words to it, I think. And I think you're right. It is totally subjective and it is totally different. Um, like as for me, like I, wanting to be a writer for a long time, I'd always encountered things kind of meant for Dungeons and Dragons, or especially online, of just the like, man, I need the name for a tavern. I wonder if there's just like a random tavern name generator online or whatever. And it's like, oh, there totally is, and it's intended for Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, and you just encounter a ton of that. And I always had this sort of basic idea of like, sort of what Dungeons and Dragons was.
mm-hmm.
Uh, but I had no experience playing with it. I didn't even really have any interest in playing it until and you and I had been friends, or at least we'd known each other for a few years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But then you just sort of randomly approached me and asked if, like, said that you were getting a group of people together to get back into Dungeons and Dragons that you'd played some before, and you were wondering if I'd be interested in joining. Um, and I figured it's like I don't know if I'm going to enjoy this. Like that, I'll give it a shot. I figured I'll go for a session or two, and if I don't like it, I don't have to stick around. Um, and there ended up being 8 of us total, right? 7 players,
Yeah.
and with you as the DM. Um, Quite a few of us didn't really know each other when we started playing. Um, it was a lot of, it was kind of a couple of close friendships separated out in the group, and a lot of acquaintances. Um, and we did the first, like, we sat down and made characters. Then the next time we met, we actually played, and I was immediately hooked.
Yeah.
It was nothing at all like I expected. It was an entirely unique experience, and and it was like sort of right away, I couldn't imagine not continuing to play. It just, and and I think that's sort of like getting at this, like, why do we keep coming back? Is I have this constant memory of how powerful that first experience was and how powerful that whole first campaign was for me, of just like the ups and downs. The Your mom made the comment years later that she never heard anybody laugh as hard as like the group of us, like sitting down there in the basement and playing D&D.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like it's all of that is just like so. It's not even that I'm like feel like I'm chasing that high, but it's just that like I remember what it was like to be sort of new to the game and to be experiencing all that stuff for the first time, and the comedy and the drama and everything, and um, just this immediate realization that both as a person who wanted to be an author and as a person who had played a lot of video games, that this was an entirely unique experience. It was like the best parts of writing and the best parts of like playing video games with your friends, but just taken to a level that was impossible anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. It's a impossible to replicate in another medium. Like
Mm.
there's things that get close, somewhat, but nothing can replicate in person role playing gameplay with people you enjoy the company of. I think that when talking about what brings us back, what keeps you going, what keeps you playing these games, what makes you deal with the hurdles you have to jump over to play these games, I think a lot of it will come down to nostalgia and memories and that kind of
Right.
foundation you've built. I think for a lot of people, it's escapism, and that can be
Absolutely.
a negative or a positive thing. Like escapism kind of is kind of that double sided coin. But I think, at least for our group's experience, the escapism aspect of it has been a super positive, healthy thing. That it's not this like I reject the real world and isolate myself into this pretend one. It's this like the real world has struggles that I'm facing on a day-to-day basis. I have things that aren't going well, things that are hard to deal with, or just a world that I don't feel like I can be impactful in certain ways. And then you take yourself and put yourself in the shoes of the hero, and you can impact the world. You can change the
Right.
story. There's an injustice from some powerful organization, some powerful entity. You don't just have to like sit there and be angry that that exists in the world. You pick up your battle axe and you go to war. Like you get to go and
Oh yeah.
make that difference. And I think that that is so empowering. I think that's a big thing. That escapism empowerment aspect of it is something big. And for me, it's always been the social aspect of it that's been the number one piece. Um, I love playing video games with friends online. I love, there's so many digital mediums and stuff like that where you can do these sorts of things. And then you also just like spending time with your friends. You like going and grabbing dinner and having conversations or going to a concert or whatever. But there's something so different about a like multiple hour long, everyone in person engaged playing a game like this together that is like a social experience,
Right.
a like bonding friendship thing that you just can't replicate. You can't make that any way else. There's no other way to build something like that. And that sense of community is just it can't be replicated. It's awesome. And I think that that's
Right.
all these aspects play into it with what keeps me coming back. But I think that that social aspect of it has always been the like heart and soul of what I loved about it.
Well, and that's what Sclera has mentioned as well. Like one thing that he's really appreciated about the channel is that like it's given us an excuse to hang out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like there's kind of this big chunk between like, okay, we're all out of college. So now I'm just never seeing any of my friends. We sometimes we go and get food, but it's not like, we're getting lunch together 3 days out of the week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we just never hang out anymore. Um, which really sucks. Like that is the worst thing about being an adult is everybody has this perception that like they're all in it alone now or whatever, where it's like, and that's something like we've just kind of changed since we've been doing the channel. It's like we get dinner a lot more than we used to. We just like hang out more than we used to because we sort of realize that like, oh yeah, we can still do that. Like like that's something we can do, and that's something that like Sclur has really appreciated about the channel is it just gave us an excuse to hang out and gave us an excuse to kind of get out of the house and hang out and do stuff. I guess not you. You live there, but
It's still
gave
an
the rest
excuse
of
to
us
bring
an
everyone to
excuse.
come to me. It's just easier for me.
Right.
I don't have to move anywhere.
Um, and so that social aspect is absolutely huge. And it's it's everybody's brain and everybody's sense of humor all put sort of towards the same task.
Mm-hmm.
It's you know the thing about you and I have talked before about how like Dungeons and Dragons is kind of just an exercise in group storytelling. Most tabletop RPGs are just like we're going to sit down and tell a story together as a group of people. But because of that, you get moments that are impossible to get if you were just writing a book or um, playing video games, because nothing is scripted, nothing is pre-planned. You never have any idea how terribly wrong or terribly right something is going to go. Um, our very first D&D campaign, Matty G's character falling through two windows in the same encounter, uh, like once into a canal and then just like once into a building. Um, like we we couldn't have planned any of that, and it has to just happen organically. And um, that's always what's just so much fun about it. It's like if you're a really good DM, you can kind of see some stuff coming and you can kind of prep for it. And there's these great moments where the players do exactly what you thought they would. Um, and you can rely on that to really great effect. But it's so much more interesting when nothing happens that you were expecting. And that's just impossible to do in video games. It's you're just dealing with what was coded into the game, or you're dealing with, what the developers expected you to do. And for everything that Larian Studios like new players would try at one point or another, we've in our in a side playthrough of the game, we totally encountered some stuff that it was like, no,
They didn't
they
see this
weren't
coming.
ready for this.
Yeah.
Yeah. When the druids charged out of the gates of their encampment off into an empty refugee camp and just stood around yelling, it was pretty obvious that Larian Studios hadn't expected us to take quite the course through that game that we had.
Mm-hmm.
But there's plenty of other stuff that it's like, oh wow,
They
I'm
thought that through.
amazed they saw this coming. Yeah, they prepared for this. Dungeons and Dragons doesn't have that limitation on it, and that's part, I think, of what just makes it special. And like that's part really a lot of what keeps me coming back to it is like the uniqueness of that experience.
Mm-hmm. I think that, like we've kind of talked about a lot, it's just not, you can't replicate it. You can't replicate
Mm-hmm.
the mixture of the like camaraderie, friendship, the collaboration, the storytelling aspect, and the lack of a sort of software confinement. That the software confinement is your ability to compute by your brain alone. Like it's the only
Right.
confinement that it has. Only limitation is your ability to think through a situation, which means that there is essentially no limits on it in what you can react to. There is nothing confining you from being like, that's the path you're going to take. Well, let me think about it. This makes sense of what would happen next. You'd have to
Right.
do some really outlandish shit for it to completely be outside of human comprehension what would happen as a result. And that's just, it makes for a super just pure, fun, amazing time. And I mean, this is kind of predicated on the fact that you have a group that you enjoy, people you
Right.
enjoy playing with, which there's a lot of these things like that's the kind of key is building that group of people.
Absolutely.
And I think the two kind of like call to action things I would want to say both for the second one for ourselves and everyone. The first one for anyone listening to this is Will talking about the how we started. This is not to be like, oh, I'm so brave, pat me on the back. Like one person just being brave enough to walk up to a group of people that they're kind of loose friends with, one at a time. Some of them close friends, some of them loose friends, and just be like, I'm interested in this. You are welcome if you would be interested. That conversation turned into lifelong friendships That conversation turned into countless hours, like telling stories and having fun together. And it's so scary.
We had lived together in the same house for like 4 years,
Yeah, it's
and
it's
we were just kind of friends when we started playing
it's
D&D.
something that, like, it's scary. It's super scary, and I was intimidated to bring that up and have that conversation with people back when before our group came together. But that
Mhm.
simple act of overcoming that fear can build into life changing and lifelong friendships and amazing memories. So face that fear and do it. You will. I truly believe that you will not have an outcome that is negative. Like the worst outcome is people aren't interested and don't play.
Right.
Like that's it's worth it. The second thing is, if you are someone who's invested in playing the game, or that's where you end up at, don't fall for those human excuses not to. And I think that it's really easy to say I don't have time. It's
Right.
really easy to say I'm too busy. It's really easy to know both of those things aren't true, but have this weird human nature thing that just happens where you're like, this is something I enjoy doing, but for some reason my brain doesn't, like, is resistant to me pursuing doing it, which is just like a weird psychology thing that would take somebody a lot smarter than me to explain why it happens. Um, there's this human nature thing of like resistant to social interaction and like resistant to even pursuing things you enjoy, because I think it's probably got a lot to do with like the human body being the body of an animal, and that we are like animalistically lazy and like energy reserving creatures. But again, I'm not. There's no real science behind that. That's just personal theory. Um,
Speaking of lazy animals, you definitely can't see her now because she's moved to the far side of my bed. But my dog
there's a
has
dog.
spent most of the day sleeping on my bed. So
So that's us deep down. That's all we want, as our like monkey brain side of things. But all this to say, when you have opportunity, put effort out for it if it's something you enjoy.
absolutely.
This is a hobby that you get so much out of, but you're only going to get out of what you put into it, and you have to be willing to invest time, willing to make time to find out how you can play, to make time to play, and you have to find a group of like-minded people who are willing to do the same. And that's kind of the big
And we
hurdle in
should,
adulthood.
if we haven't done a full video on like advice for new game masters, we probably should do one at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that might keep you from getting a group going at first is it's like not knowing if you're going to be a good game master. Um, and at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter.
Uh-huh.
like and that was something that you and I told Jerry when he was planning on running his Star Wars game. It's like that was something he was worried about, was just like, I don't know if I'm going to be a good game master. And at one point he was setting up to run a game for his friends. And I was like, look, most of them probably haven't played a tabletop RPG before. So they're not coming into this with any expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so just like do the best you can, and that's going to be more than good enough.
Yes.
Like, and like people have this weird idea that being the game master means that the weight of the whole campaign is on their shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Like, once again, this is a group effort. This is group storytelling, and you can rely so much on your players, to move the story forward, and to move the game forward. Um, Even new players, because as soon as new players realize that they can kind of do what they want, they really begin driving the story forward themselves, and I think that's, especially for new players, that's one of the things that keeps them coming back, is
Mm-hmm.
like that, I've talked a lot in the past, like kind of amongst just our group of friends, at least, of that moment every Bethesda game has, or at least every Bethesda RPG has, where it kicks you out the front door, locks it behind you, and kind of yells, "Okay, bye, have fun."
Mm-hmm.
And it's like Fallout 3, for example, just like locks you out of the vaults after its long intro, and it's just like, "Okay, go find your dad, have fun, bye." And it's like, I don't know anything about this world that I'm stepping into, or where I am, or what to do next. Tabletop RPGs have that, but they're not bound by the same mechanics. And as soon as players realize that, it's like, oh, wait a minute, we could just travel to this other city on the map right now. Like, and we can just say whatever we want to the NPCs, and oh wait, this mystery that you've given us, we actually have to solve that like ourselves
Mm-hmm.
is like
I can't Google a guide on how to
yeah,
solve your
you
puzzles.
know, player like players starting to figure that out for the first time is such a unique experience, and that tends to like once it's settled in what's possible, they tend to just like to some degrees get addicted to that feeling and
Mm-hmm.
like
And that's what
kind
brings
of
them
keep
back.
pursuing it.
And that
Absolutely.
kind of tying into
It's an
this video.
addiction.
It's what
We
do I,
have an addiction.
what keeps bringing us
That's what it is.
back? It's our addiction to this game, to
Like
the empowerment it provides.
my crippling tabletop RPG addiction is what keeps me coming back.
Hi, I'm Matthew, and I am a dungeon master. Hi, Matthew. You know, you have to have like D&D Players Anonymous to break you of it, but don't go to that. Instead, pursue it and
No,
keep
no.
doing this game.
The problem with the problem with like D&D Players Anonymous is sooner or later they just form new D&D play groups. And,
Yeah, exactly. They just start meeting there. They just bring a table in the middle of their circle of chairs and start rolling some dice. But yeah, I think that the answer to the question, what brings you back, will vary a little bit from person to person.
right.
But at the end of the day, what it really boils down to is this is an experience that you cannot get in any other medium. You can't get this in any other way. And it is an experience that, for lots of different reasons, is super empowering, super fun, just like honest to goodness, low down, no problems fun. That is in a way that is in a it's all long as the group that you're with is healthy and good and positive, is inclusive to everyone there, empowering to everyone there, and just fun and free, and it gives you a place to tell a story together and make
Right.
really good memories, both in this fantasy world that you're playing in and in the real world with the friendships and the bonds that you form.
And I think by and large, you know, speaking of the uniqueness of that experience, you're going to find, you know, sort of events and results and emotions much sort of purer. Um, you know, a true betrayal in Dungeons and Dragons lands with significantly more weight than in any video game I've ever played.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as far as actually me myself feeling betrayed, I've never gotten in a video game. I've had it at least twice in Dungeons and Dragons where I was actually like on the verge of offended. Like, you know, like I like it felt like legitimate betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's true of sort of every emotional response in Dungeons and Dragons. The humor hits much harder.
The friendship and camaraderie of the party and the characters.
Absolutely. Like loyalty feels much stronger. Betrayals sting fiercer. Loss of party members or important NPCs feels far more impactful in a tabletop game than it ever really could um, in something like a video game. You know, which in a lot of this stuff is kind of the closest comparison. Man, the sun decided briefly to come out, and I'm
the
just
gods of D&D. Lathander is shining his light on you for sharing the good word of RPGs.
well, at least partially fix that. Damn, half blind. It's you know, it's like it's another thing that just contributes to how unique that experience is, and to the sort of intensity of those emotions are are part of what comes back. The immense guilt I felt the first time I accidentally killed another party member, um, like absolutely contributed to me continuing to play the game, because it was just this realization that it was like, wow, that was a like sort of legitimately powerful experience. Um, it made me feel powerful because you know I was alive and he was dead. Haha. Uh, not really. I think he was downed when I killed him. But it, you know, it just
And
like
he deserved
it.
it. We don't need to tell the whole story, but he deserved it.
Um, I only dimly remember his character anyway. But it just like it was an emotional experience. It felt bad.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a weird thing to say. It's like, wow, that felt terrible. Let's keep going. Um, let's do more of that, please. Um, but it was just sort of the intensity of the experience that like, and victory, survival feels really like it means something. Actually overcoming challenges, solving puzzles, like all of it is just satisfying in a way that video games are not.
Mm-hmm.
And like if you're willing to lean into that and willing to like make that sort of part of your experience, so you're going to find that rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Um, I think that's probably about a good place for us to stop. Because I think that if we keep talking about this, we'll keep saying the same things in different ways. Which is,
Probably.
this is a experience you can't replicate, and it is
Hmm.
something that will build lifelong memories, and it is worth investing the time and effort into continuing. And
Absolutely.
it's important to take moments like this, whether it's watching a video or just conversations with your friends or conversations with yourself, to be like, why am I not? If you're not, or why am I
Mhm.
continuing to? I think it's good to take that moment and be like, this is something that I derive immense value and joy out of. It is worth the investment of time. It is worth the investment of effort if I'm the person coordinating or whatever to get the group together. It is worth that because the payout is something that you can't get anywhere else. So I think that that's kind of the call to action. If you haven't played
Mhm.
for a while, play. Call up your friends. If you're having scheduling issues, try and make time to have that conversation of like, why are we having these issues? What is the scheduling conflict? How can we find a time? Does it have to be consistent? Does it have to change? If it has to change, let's make somebody responsible for coordinating this, and let's be honest with ourselves and intentional in responding to that person.
Right.
It's something that's worth doing and will help you kind of build that core group and make these kinds of memories. Um, Also, engagement. Ha ha ha. Comment. Why did you start playing, and what keeps bringing you back? If you're somebody who's playing already, like what was the thing that brought you into the fold that made you start playing, and what keeps you playing? It might be some of the stuff we've talked about, or some aspect of the stuff we've talked about. But like we said, every person is so unique and different in what they derive joy from and what gives them that kind of great feeling from the game. What is the piece of it that keeps you wanting to play and keeps you making the time and the effort to do so?
Well, and if you're not playing yet, I would like to know, like, to sort of what can we do to help? Like,
Mm-hmm.
is there advice that you want? Is there, a bit of inspiration you feel like you need? Like, I think if you're not playing already and you're watching content on our channel, that's like weird, but probably a great first step.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I would just like to know. It's like, if you haven't started playing tabletop RPGs yet, why and what do you feel like you need to sort of cross that bridge? Because trust me, it is absolutely worth it.
Once you cross it, you're going to burn it and leave it
Yep.
because you're not going
Hmm.
back to the other side.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think that's probably where we'll stop this. Please, yeah, all those comments, please leave those so we can know how best to help someone who's wanting to get started, and also just be uplifted hearing what people love about the games that we love. So thank you everybody for watching. Now go forth, slay dragons, sling spells, roll dice,
Hmm.
and enjoy your downtime activities.
And I,
Seven
and I
people.
and I still just want to keep going. Still just want to keep
Makes
playing.
you pine for the good old college days where you can freaking play. You can meet on a
Heck
Friday
yeah, man.
afternoon after everyone's done with class and play till 1 in
Do
the
you have
morning.
do you have any idea how much I miss going down to your basement bedroom at 2 p.m. on every Sunday afternoon, and just playing D&D for 8 hours,
A full day's work of D&D. A small break
eating.
in the middle to go get some cheap pizza.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
man.
Good
Ah.
times.